Have you ever known who's calling before you answer the phone?
This is a very common human experience, and most people have had that happen at least once. The question is it just a coincidence? Is it merely your subconscious mind calculating the odds because certain people tend to call at that time or under those circumstances? Or is something else going on? Could it be that minds are connected non locally, telepathically? That somehow a person's thoughts or feelings are traversing space and connecting to another's, resulting in fuzzy intuitions about who is calling us. Well, we could accept that on face value or simply dismiss it ad hoc. But neither of these two ways of looking at the issue is actually a scientific response. If we were to apply the scientific method, we would actually test the claim. And that's exactly what biologist Rupert Sheldrake decided to do in the early 2000s and in a brilliantly simple way. He devised an experimental procedure that could be applied not merely in labs, but which anybody can utilize in their own lounge rooms or any other suitable place for that matter. The brilliance was not in sophisticated analysis or experimental procedures, but in the experiment's accessibility to ordinary people and their own relationships. This means the usability for me, for you, and just about all of us. In this video, I'm going to share that experiment with you, share Sheldrake's remarkable results, and show you how you can test yourself and your friends and family for any latent telepathic ability. So strap yourself in. It's surprisingly very simple. The experiment is straightforward. A participant chooses 4 people they know well, friends or family. At a set time, one of those 4 people is randomly selected to call them. When the phone rings, the participant has to guess who it is before answering and before picking up the phone, or cheating by doing something like looking at the screen. Now, if there's no telepathy involved, what success rate would you expect from each call as a percentage? Remember, there are 4 random callers, so it's 1 in 4 or 25%. I'm sure you worked that out. But when Sheldrake ran the test with thousands of trials, that's not what he found. Sheldrake and his colleagues reported results that appeared to support a telepathic effect. In an initial experimental series conducted by Sheldrake and Pam Smart in 2005, involving 63 participants and a total of 571 trials, participants guessed the caller correctly about 40% of the time, significantly above the 25% expected by chance. Statistically, this deviation was highly significant. In a follow-up series of more rigorous trials where procedures were tightened, such as continuous video monitoring to prevent any cues, the success rate actually rose to about 45% correct out of 271 trials. This far exceeded the chance rate. Sheldrake pointed out that the odds of this happening by chance were astronomically low, about 1 trillion to 1 odds. Sheldrake's positive findings prompted others to attempt independent replications. The results have been mixed. An experiment at the University of Amsterdam repeated the telephone telepathy test under controlled conditions. They reported an overall hit rate of about 29%, only slightly above the 25% chance level, but just enough to achieve statistical significance. Meanwhile, some other researchers conducting more extensive replications have reported null results. Psychologists Stefan Schmidt, Susan Muller, and Harold Wallach carried out a series of meticulously controlled telephone telepathy experiments in the mid-2000s to test Sheldrake's claims. They tried to eliminate any possible sensory cues or methodological weaknesses identified in the earlier work. Across 3 experiments totaling 557 trials with 29 participants, Schmidt and colleagues found no overall telepathy effect. The combined hit rate was about 27%, essentially at chance level. However, one noteworthy observation from their data was that a single individual out of the 29 did score consistently above chance, achieving about a 42% hit rate over 80 trials, highly statistically significant. Schmidt and colleagues concluded that if telephone telepathy exists, it may be a rare ability confined to certain people rather than a ubiquitous skill everyone subconsciously has. Yet what makes Sheldrake's experiment particularly interesting is not just the numbers, but the design itself. Unlike many laboratory experiments, his trials often took place in real-world situations. People interacted with other individuals they already knew well. So there was an emotional bond involved in all the connections. There was history, you might say. And that is actually incredibly important because participants consistently performed better when the caller was someone they were close to, a friend, a partner, a family member, or so on. That suggests that if something like telepathy actually exists, it may not behave exactly like a mechanical signal. It may be relational. Your toaster fires up when you press the button, no matter how many times you used it before or whether you like that toaster or not. Yet in the telephone telepathy experiments that Sheldrake and his colleagues developed and tested, phone calls, emails, and text messages also, this relational effect appeared. This suggests that if this effect is real, it isn't tied to a specific technology. It seems to emerge from an empathic connection between people. Of course, Sheldrake's findings haven't gone unchallenged. Critics have pointed to possible flaws in the experimental setup. Things like subtle sensory cues, imperfect randomization, or unconscious bias in how participants make their guesses. And as mentioned, some other researchers tried to replicate the results under strict conditions, and the findings were mixed. Some showed small effects, others found results close to chance. There's also the broader concern that these kinds of experiments are difficult to standardize. Some changes in design can produce different outcomes. So, from a mainstream scientific perspective, the case is far from settled. Yet what makes this fascinating for me is that despite all the criticism, the phenomenon doesn't simply disappear. Across different studies, different researchers, and different conditions, we still see hints of the same pattern. Not strong enough to be universally accepted, admittedly, but not weak enough to be dismissed entirely. And that puts us in an unusual position, because if even a small part of this is genuine, then our current understanding of the mind may be incomplete. In the standard model of the mind, consciousness is something that happens inside the brain. It's local, it's contained. But experiments like this, however imperfect, raise the possibility that it might not be entirely confined in that way, that under certain conditions, information might be accessed or shared beyond the usual sensory channels. And that's where the idea of the non-local or extended mind begins to enter the conversation. What I really like about Sheldrake and colleagues' telephone telepathy experiments and related experiments using other digital media is that they are relatively easy to conduct at home for those curious to test things for themselves. All you need to replicate the original experiment is to get 5 people together, preferably people who know each other well. The receiver should be in a location far enough away from those calling such that there's no possibility of sensory leakage. In a different room or even a distant house, for example, the receiver must name the person they feel is calling before they pick up the phone or look at the screen. The callers should be selected at random. You can do this easily enough with a chatbot like ChatGPT. Just give each caller a number before each call and ask the machine to select a number between 1 and 4 each time. Alternatively, use a random number generator. There are plenty online. You could also simply use a dice. Just roll again if you roll numbers 5 and 6. You could also do as many trials as you prefer. But after each person has finished their turn as the receiver, make sure you record how many hits or misses you got. After everyone has finished, add up all the hits and misses. If you get significantly above the chance 25%, it is suggestive of a significant effect, assuming there's been no sensory leakages or other experimental problems. In general, the more trials you do, the more reliable the results can be considered to be. For example, if each person has 4 guesses, you'll end up with 20 total guesses. Now, let's say you get 9 out of 20 or 45% hits. A 45% success rate might seem impressive, but how many attempts you have really matters. With only 20 guesses, getting 9 right could still be a fluke, and the probability or p-value isn't low enough to be convincing. But with 100 guesses, getting 45 right is extremely unlikely to happen by chance, giving a very low p-value and much stronger evidence. In simple terms, the more trials you have, the more reliable the result becomes and the harder it is to explain away by luck. So, Can minds really communicate at a distance? The honest scientific answer is we don't know for sure. But there's nothing stopping you from exploring the idea personally by testing intuitions in real-world decision-making, recording and analyzing dreams, gathering together in interest groups, or via experiments like those devised by Rupert Sheldrake and friends. The question of the extended mind isn't going away, at least not here on the other Singularity channel. So for more stories, research and ideas about the expansive potentials of the mind and what it might mean for the future, please do subscribe. I'm Marcus T. Anthony. See you again soon.